Welcome, everyone, to our panel today, Operational Resilience, a Leadership Imperative. Thank you so much for listening in. My name is Maggie Tittel, and I'm the VP of Risk Management here at Payments Canada, and I'm excited to dive into some really interesting content with you today. So last year, this panel focused on the foundations of operational resiliency, how it differs from other frameworks, and the importance of its inclusion within strategic planning. This year, we want to look a bit beyond that and dive into how the role of leadership can play in fostering operational resilience. So with me today, I have three exceptional risk leaders. We have Sonia Baxendale, the President and CEO of the Global Risk Institute. We have Peter Dodic, the Chief Risk Officer with Payments Canada, and Mario Falvo, the Chief Financial and Risk Officer with Interac. So before we dive into our questions for today, I want to hand it over to our panelists for some introductions. So Sonia, let's start with you.
Thank you, Maggie, and it's great to be back here with you again this year at the 2024 Payment Canada Summit. As Maggie said, my name is Sonia Baxendale. I'm the CEO of the Global Risk Institute. The Global Risk Institute partners with industry, academia, and government to address current and emerging risks. In addition to the Global Risk Institute, I'm a corporate board director on a number of financial sector boards, both within Canada and globally. Prior to that, I had a corporate career at one of the major Canadian banks running retail and wealth management. And it's terrific to be here again with this group to talk about risk leadership.
Thank you, Sonia. And we'll move over to Pete next.
Hey, Maggie, thanks for having me on. My name is Peter Dodic. I'm the Chief Risk Officer at Payments Canada. I've been with the organization for 6 years now, and I lead the compliance and audit and risk and legal functions. Before my time here at Payments Canada, I've worked at the Bank of Montreal for 15 years in finance, corporate development, and in risk. And in a former life, I was an engineer in the resource sector. So that's me. A little bit about Payments Canada for a second. Payments Canada, of course, owns and operates Canada's payment clearing and settlement infrastructure. And that includes, of course, the systems, but also the rules, the bylaws, and the standards.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pete. And last but not least, Mario, over to you.
Yep. Thank you, Maggie. Good day, everyone. Mario Falvo here, the Chief Financial Risk Officer for Interac Corp. My portfolio at Interac includes our finance, vendor management, and risk management functions, and I'm also responsible for managing the ongoing requirements of our prominent payment system designations with the Bank of Canada. For those of you who may not know who we are at Interac, we operate the e-transfer service, along with other payment systems such as debit and automated banking machine or ABM infrastructures. We also offer verification solutions within the public and private sectors through our subsidiary 2Keys and the acquisition of the rights to Secure Key digital ID services for Canada. Prior to Interac, I spent nearly 16 years with Meridian Credit Union, starting out in the finance function and then moving into risk management, inclusive of compliance, fraud, AML, and internal audit. Very happy to be here today and to have the opportunity to build upon our panel last year and discuss the very important topic of leadership and operational resilience with my respected peers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mario. So without further ado, we'll dive into our first question of the day. So as you are all aware, as risk leaders, operational resilience has become increasingly a priority at the leadership level and has been recognized as a key capability to be developed in today's uncertain times. What I'd like to focus on right now with you all is the qualities and competencies that you see as required for effective risk leadership. And beyond that, how do you see operational resilience supporting effective strategic decision-making? So Sonia, we'll start with you on this question.
Terrific. Thanks, Maggie. So I think, in order to think about what the characteristics are, we really have to start with, what does the risk environment look like today that everyone's dealing with? And I think sort of the starting point is that the risks are more complex than they've ever been. And I think equally important is the risks are more interconnected than they've ever been. So we're no longer dealing with, sort of the financial risks, market, credit, liquidity as the sort of primary function, although they still are there. We now have geopolitical, AI, climate, cyber, third party. The list is endless of the kinds of risks that risk managers are dealing with. And so that leads to complexity of teams, the interconnectedness, as I've mentioned. And so I don't think some of the sort of just the analytical kinds of skills that maybe were really important in risk managers and risk leaders in the past are sufficient. Those things are still important. But now I think, in many ways, when I look at risk leadership, I think you have to be brave, you have to be contrarian, you have to be willing to challenge, willing to be curious and explore, things that we never would have traditionally said about risk managers or risk leaders. So I think these non-traditional attributes and skills and qualities now are really essential over and above those more traditional skill sets that we required. So, it really is, it's a challenge today to be a risk leader. And if we think about, how does operational resilience therefore support effective decision making, I think you need to look to risk leaders to bring, 360-degree thinking. They have to be able to think really broadly, think about the risks and the opportunities, what those mean, without getting bogged down in the details. So even that leadership quotient is difficult. But, I think the risk leader is the individual that really ends up being very accountable for ensuring that this kind of thinking gets brought into the strategic planning process for the entire organization, and they bring that operational resilience mindset to the table. So it's a lot.
Absolutely. And it's a different skill set compared to what it was 10 years ago, for sure. Mario, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, that's great. That's really great backdrop, Sonia. So, if I first thinking about qualities and competencies, I'd suggest, first off, being really forward-looking, ability to scenario plan. Sound judgment is really critical, but you can't plan to mitigate every risk. So you need to be able to assess what's most important to guard against. What's becoming increasingly more important for risk leaders is also the ability to leverage data-driven insights for risk management. Gone are the days where risk activities are based solely on qualitative considerations only. Risk professionals need to apply both quantitative approaches to risk measurement, both in order to assess the risk level, but also the effectiveness of the risk controls as well. The other key competency for risk professionals is independent challenge over the first line of the risk owners. This is a particularly important skill, as a critical element of our role in risk management is to challenge completeness of risk identification, as well as the assessments of inherent and residual risks that are made by the risk owners. And of course, we need to do that in a professional and respectful manner with our colleagues. Thinking about the second question on how operational resilience supports highly effective strategic decision-making, my initial insight is that knowing you have strong operational resilience is going to give you confidence to set a bold strategy for your business. That could be the pursuit of an opportunity that delivers your business or diversifies your business, or scaling up operations to increase your growth. So whatever your business considers a bold move, you need to ensure that what you have today is resilient before you start applying financial and human resources to new or enhanced endeavors. Your current operations fund your strategy, so strong operational resilience provides that solid foundation for growth and expansion of your business. It's going to be really hard to get your board behind bold strategic decisions and bets if there's concern with maintaining operations through disruption.
Absolutely. So having that confidence in your existing approach is really important to enable what you want to do in the future. That's wonderful. Peter, over to you for the last word on this question.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. It's a really good question and something that I think about quite a bit. I'll try to answer the two pieces, first on leadership and then second on decision support. So similar to Sonia's comments around resilient leadership, right? In terms of leadership, my sense is you need a blend of both hard and soft skills, right? And if I think about hard skills, I think about risk leaders having kind of table stakes understanding of your frameworks and your tools, understanding the business and their needs, your industry, regulatory landscape. Beyond that table stake stuff, I look at soft skills that are a bit more important, and they can be harder to find in the risk world. I think of skills like strategic thinking. I think of skills like connecting the dots, communication, team building, talent evaluation, recruiting, retention, cultural building, and I think having the right values. And I think Sonia mentioned it a second ago. When I say values, I mean things like performing with courage, right? I think of things like speaking truth to power, challenging the business, really exerting influence and spending your political capital at the top of the house. Maybe a last thought in terms of leadership, I'd say, is building a culture of collaboration and trust, right? And I think that kind of collaboration could help facilitate information flow and even solicit second opinions, right? I think it's important to build bridges and work horizontally across the firm, and that can help us really cut to the matter and I think get us to the right solution a bit quicker. If I pivot from leadership and think in terms of decision support, right? I think op resilience enables the firm, enables leadership to have a holistic and a longer term perspective, right? I don't think you're going to be lurching from crisis to crisis or firefighting daily. I think it allows management to have more of a focus on where it matters. And of course, it allows leaders to have informed decisions about the future, right? Knowing what steps they can take to mitigate potential future risk, right? And that's what it's all about. So I think understanding the risk associated with different opportunities in the future, leaders can make informed, holistic decisions about which ones to pursue. I think leadership is also really important to us. And when I think about what's critical to me, my board, all of us at Payments Canada, we provide critical infrastructure to the Canadian economy, right? So as a reminder, we clear and settle almost $500 billion every business day. So this is an initiative I think is well worth pursuing for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Pete. So I think you all touched on a bit of the challenger role that risk can play, and it came up last year as part of the discussion as well. And I want to dive into a bit of that to some extent now. What I want to ask of each of you for this question is how risk leaders can best position operational resilience as an enabling framework that supports an organization's ability to deliver in the face of disruption, which comes about in all different ways, it seems, in this day and age. So Mario, I'll go to you first for this one.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we as risk leaders need to ensure that our business partners understand the importance of op resilience as a competitive advantage. So we really need to start out by showing the value of it. That means not just focusing on the negative impacts from a disruption, because that's what people tend to focus on first and foremost. But more importantly, the benefits, like what that can bring to your operation. So an organization that can deliver through disruption is always going to be able to do more than one that doesn't, because it won't have to divert significant resources away from strategy execution to deal with a business disruption. It also means we don't need to expend incremental financial resources when a disruption occurs, and that means more money for strategic investment to build your business. This, of course, means that you have to allocate some level of investment to maintaining strong operational resilience. It needs to be something that's part of your normal operations, can't be a project that you put a defined scope and a start and an end to. Maintaining a strong operational resilience posture requires continuous effort and investment. It's not ever going to be a one and done. So you really need to make operational resilience a part of the DNA in your organization. Ensuring that it's considered in the design within any new implementation will not only establish a strong posture right from the start, but it can also minimize the risk of rework after the fact.
Yeah, resilience by design seems to be becoming a new theme that comes up more and more. Sonia, over to you for your take.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. I thought what I would do is maybe introduce the concept of red teaming. This is something at GRI that we're talking to a lot of our members about. And just, as a bit of a reminder as to what this is, it's really, it originated in the military originally, and it's just really a systemic way of making critical and contrarian thinking part of your strategic planning process, so that you actually build into your process the notion of really trying to test the flaws and the vulnerabilities in your choices. And it's not meant to just be disruptive to the process. It's meant to be additive to the process, and really to be incorporated in a collaborative, productive, constructive way, but to get to better ssolutions. And I think we started in business, we started using this kind of thinking around cyber, because, in terms of testing system vulnerabilities and those sorts of things. But I think it applies much more broadly in terms of a framework to allow you to make some assessments around the choices you've made, and deliberately challenging the organization's strategic planning choices, particularly given, where we talked about how much more complex things are and the interconnectedness. It allows you to sort of explore and assess the decisions you make through a different kind of lens. And so I think it really helps weighing the pros and cons, the risk reward. It doesn't make a decision for you, but it gives you a framework to think through your optionality. And it often brings out maybe scenarios or potential options that you didn't think about through your normal process. So I think it's a great mechanism used, not too much, not for every decision, because it's a it's a time-consuming process. So, but I do think it can be a good framework to bring this notion of operational resilience to life for the broader organization and for your strategic planning processes.
That's a great example, and I'm sure there are many, many more uses of red teaming that can be done out there. Peter, what's your take on this question?
Yeah, I have maybe 3 or 4 quick thoughts I can add to Sonia's awesome answer. Maybe firstly is having a holistic approach, right? I think for my firm, resilience encompasses not only tech or infrastructure, but also critical pieces like people, process, third-party relationships, right? And it's all about positioning resilience as a comprehensive framework, right? That can address all aspects of the ops, not just a certain piece of the ops. I think secondly is culture, and that's probably a big theme of today's talk. We need to embed resilience in the culture of our firms, right? This means creating a culture of both risk awareness, but also responsibility, and ensuring that all folks understand, and I mean everybody understands, the role they play in ops resilience. Third, and maybe even most important, I think, is continual improvement. So if I think about my team and maybe indeed leadership at Payments Canada itself, I think we all do what we can to position resilience as more of an ongoing process than a one-time initiative, right? Of course, there's a regular review and update of our strategies and our policies and our procedures. And I think that's really important because it ensures that we can adapt to evolving threats. And I think it strengthens our ability to deliver in the face of challenge or disruption. Maybe lastly, I quickly mentioned the importance of integrating some of this resilience into your planning process, right? Like much of risk analysis, you have to identify and assess risks that can impact your firm's ability to achieve goals. And then it's all really about building strategies to mitigate those risks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pete, for that. I think that we went through some pretty fulsome themes within that question. And I think the next one's going to dive into the culture aspect probably a bit more as well. When we look more internally at an organization, what I'd like to ask this time around is how you guys can see leaders modeling and embedding operational resilience within their organizational culture. I think we've already hit on a couple of different areas of this one, but Pete, I'll go to you first for your answer and your take on this one.
Yeah, it's a big question, right? And in my experience, I think in embedding things like resilience across org culture requires a couple of things. One is good governance, of course, and one is having, I think, a strong risk culture. So if I think in terms of governance, right, I think this means having a few things in place. Let's start with having the right board structure and engagement. I think risk has to have a prime seat at the board itself. Beyond the board, we also need the right structure of the firm, right? One that makes risk a part of the senior leadership team. So it's important that risk has a say. I think beyond that governance, which gives us the right mechanisms, right? You really need the proper risk culture, which aligns and directs your risk-based thinking. So at Payments Canada, right, we really intend to embed risk in the DNA of our firm, right? We're all about our mandate, which is safety and soundness. And my role is really to make risk meaningful. It's to make risk meaningful strategy, to delivery, decision-making, and so forth. And if you think about that, it's really about leadership, right? Leadership matters. And leadership is a big part about getting resilience at the top of the corporate agenda, right? Tone from the top matters. It's important to note that leadership can't just sit with the CRO. Other leaders must buy into this process and support what I would call a long-term focus on resilience. We can't build it in a quarter. We can't build it in a year, right? I think resilience is a multi-year journey, and it requires consistent governance and leadership. Lastly, I'd add, I think it's important to regularly communicate the importance of resilience. It's important to provide training, right? Folks need to understand the training, the skills, they need the resources to really understand and implement these practices that make our systems safe for all.
Thank you, Pete. It's really resilience is, and it has to be in everything that we do in order to really make it work. Sonia, over to you for your view.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, I think Pete covered it all, to be honest with you, on that question. So, he hit on all the really important things there. So I think what I want to do is just go a little deeper on this notion of a collaborative culture, because I think when you're in risk, sometimes people misinterpret what the collaborative culture means, because, as a risk leader, you have to challenge. And to really have to really deliver on that mandate of operational resilience, you're testing things within the organization, and sometimes you're trying to put pressure into what decisions get made and how they get made and all those sorts of things. And so I think we have to be really thoughtful about what we mean when we say to people collaborative culture. And sometimes, we got to ensure that that doesn't mean complacent culture in an organization. It doesn't mean, you have to go along to get along, those kinds of things. If you're a good partner, you'll be agreeable. And so I think, learning how to do that in a way that is constructive and not combative within the organization. And I think, ensuring that the culture encourages different points of views, and that you bring out the notion that you can be collaborative and disagree, or you can be collaborative and have a different view. So the notion in terms of a good risk culture and a good collaborative culture, to me, is that views need to both be different views need to be valued. They also need to be heard, right? You have to have an organization where you can hear the views of people at different levels, where, honesty and openness is encouraged. So, we've got to be really thoughtful, really mindful, and really intentional about this stuff, because I do think that collaborative cultures can occasionally get a little bit confused with agreeable and complacent cultures. In order for us to really use it as a competitive advantage, as Mario said at the beginning, you've got to be able to push against the system a little bit, and that sometimes means pushing against the grain a little bit. So and I think you can be you can have a really strong collaborative culture and all the things that Pete just described with that tension in the system. But I do think where it's toughest is in your risk group, and where you really need to have to be intentional about it is within a risk environment.
Absolutely. And it can be a challenge to challenge, but a lot of the times that collaboration and bringing together of different perspectives really helps to build something that is greater than the sum of everyone's individual parts and individual perspectives. And Mario, over to you for the last word on this question.
So yeah, so completely agree and amplify what Pete and Sonia both talked about. So you talk about from a top level enterprise view, governance, risk culture, leadership, and I think what Sonia described was what sits in the middle, and that's the collaborative culture and the way in which we work and we interact, both between the risk function and others, but even across the organization, your first line teams as well. Coming at it from sort of the bottoms up approach, just to round it out, a real simple way in which leaders can model, I think, and embed op resilience into their org's culture is to leverage the principles of business continuity. It's something that any team in your org can do. So you start with with operational resilience within your own team and get everyone involved. It's not just the leader and a few people, it's the entire team if you really want to make it well understood and embedded. So, you identify the critical activities within your team. Do your key roles have processes documented and others cross-trained on them? Create some disruption scenarios that are specific to your team, and then assess your ability to maintain your key activities during those and identify gaps that you have to remediate. So if you get your leaders doing this, they're not only building a culture of resiliency within their team, but they're also directly strengthening the organization's resiliency at the highest level. So I think starting on a smaller scale like this within an individual team can really help to embed that on a much bigger scale across the rest of the organization.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mario. So we covered a lot on the internal view in that question. Now we're going to shift to look more externally. So what I'd like to ask for this question is how leaders can best collaborate across organizations, whether that be with key partners, with regulators, with other stakeholders that they work with, in order to support operational resilience in this increasingly complex environment. So Sonia, I'll go to you for your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So I think probably the most important thing that we need to do in terms of being effective with operational resilience with the various stakeholders is be the catalyst in our organization to have have individuals be more organizationally focused as opposed to individual business line focused or functionally focused. When we think about the kinds of risks that we've been talking about and the interconnectedness of the risks, the complexity that we're dealing with, operating in silos, it makes it very difficult to manage risks, or just thinking about your individual business unit. So I think there's a really important role for risk leaders to play in this regard, in ensuring that there's alignment between employees, customers, regulators, and that's about thinking about the risks end to end. And this is a perfect place in the organization to bring that concept to life and ensure that the broader organization, sees that through their strategic planning, sees that through the measurements that we use in the organization, all those kinds of things. Because if we look at, let's take the, geopolitical risk, for example, it doesn't belong, like you can't really centralize that. You've got to think about it across various business units, and it can impact your third-party relationships. It can impact supply chain. It can impact climate strategy, macroeconomic impacts. So it touches so many things. So I think, the really key thing that we can do to help us better collaborate with our partners is to bring this end-to-end view around decision-making and around planning. And I think that will help organizations deal with the complexity of their businesses and their decision-making much more effectively.
That's great. The end-to-end view is so important. Mario, over to you for your view.
Yeah, so I would take that that end-to-end view and then transition it into looking at industry collaboration groups. I think it's a really impactful way of doing what we're talking about here. So Pete and I are actually very fortunate to be a member of not just one, but two groups like this on behalf of our respective organizations. The first is a group of financial market infrastructures that meet about twice per year, and an FMI refers to systems and entities that are involved in activities like clearing and settlement and recording of various financial transactions. So the forum that we belong to it's a private sector initiative to proactively improve the resilience of FMIs. We share and develop best practices. We seek to address common concerns, promote an integrated and comprehensive view of risks that we face. And we're also expected to promote the common good and the regulatory goals of increasing resilience, avoiding mismanagement of risks that could weaken the centralized infrastructure that supports financial markets, and also identify opportunities to enhance stability, including proactive regulatory engagement. The second group that we participate in is more local. It's the Canadian Financial Sector Resiliency Group, or CFRG. The CFRG is a partnership between both public and private enterprise that's led by the Bank of Canada, designed to strengthen Canada's financial sector critical infrastructure against risks to business operations, including cyber. Its mandate is to enhance the operational resilience of Canada's critical financial sector. When going back to the FMI forum, we talk about things like cybersecurity, business continuity, as well as impact on regulatory changes. The folks at that table are global, so we get to see a view on what's going on in other jurisdictions. And then the CFRG was established specifically to promote resiliency in Canada. And so we're more focused on the local financial sector, but obviously critical for our organizations. Scheduled meetings are used to facilitate operational resiliency initiatives, and then it also coordinates critical finance sector responses if we do have a systemic level operational incident. So both of these groups offer really significant opportunities for leaders to collaborate with peers in the industry, as well as regulators, on issues which can impact resilience. So if you're in an organization in an industry that doesn't have that, that's something that maybe you can consider starting up. So you can start small, just with a few other organizations in your same industry, and then hopefully that can, snowball into something bigger. But they're really a great way to structure forums to promote resiliency that can be replicated within any industry sector, really.
Yes, all those forums are very, very much important, especially in the world that we operate in, but can be applicable in any industry. And Peter, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. So as usual, I completely agree with Mario and Sonia. No surprise there. Maybe a few thoughts to add. So this is hard stuff, right? If I think about Payments Canada, we're part of a complicated system, right? And when it comes to resiliency, FMIs like us can't do it alone. We can't do it alone due to resources, whether that's people or it's finances, or due to complexity, or due to external dependencies. At the end of the day, FMIs like Payments Canada, we're a small member association that needs, I think, both internal and external support to build what I would call true resiliency. And if I think about that external piece, right, there's kind of two actors in play there. We need the regulators, and I need our members to help us build and maintain this important skill set. So if I think about the Bank of Canada, which is my regulator, they set the rules for us FMIs to follow, right? These are important standards that help build and establish really a common minimum framework. And they're important because they push us forward, right, as we continue to evolve. So it's important to have that regulatory framework in place. Secondly, as Mario just mentioned, maybe even more importantly, is the work the regulator does to bring industry together through things like CFRG, right? The bank puts a lot of effort to ensure CFRG does a good job at keeping us focused on a couple of things. One is regular testing, right? Important to have that muscle memory of kind of how things work in a time of crisis. Maybe even more important than that testing is really just that coordination of a financial sector response, right? If we have a systemic level event, how do we coordinate? How do we respond together than a more traditional siloed approach, which might have happened in years past? If I think kind of beyond that, right? Leadership is very important. You need to build relationships outside of your firm. That's a critical aspect. My team has strong relationships with risk folks from the member side. And if I think like things like our payments risk group, that has evolved into a fantastic venue for information sharing, right? This kind of engagement really supports our collective resilience. So if I think about this in totality, like in the end, I think resilience for me is like a bit like a three-legged stool, right? There's the FIs, there's regulators and FMIs like us or Interac or others. Internal skills are table stakes, frameworks and tools, those are needed. But I think you get true resiliency when you have the three perspectives in harmony, right? FMIs, regulators, and FIs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pete. So we have one last question, and it's kind of a quick one. I want to get everyone's last words and last kind of piece of advice for leaders. So Pete, we will start with you on this one. So what would you say is one thing that leaders can do today to support operational resilience within their organizations?
In terms of immediate takeaways, so what you can do today, maybe two thoughts. First, I would say something simple but critical. Review and update your plans. Review and update your playbooks, your comms, your roles and responsibilities. Make sure these artifacts are up to date and reflect the current state. I think the last thing you want during a stressful event or an outage is to have out-of-date call lists, procedures, or comms. So that's one. And lastly, maybe more important, I would encourage you to learn from your incidents, right? Capture lessons learned from events that have happened, debrief, interview folks, be honest, seek root causes, right? I think it's critical your firm has an understanding of the 5 W's around what went wrong or what could go wrong. I think those are probably simple but meaningful steps you can take to enhance your resiliency today.
Perfect. Thank you, Pete. And Mario.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a response that I gave to a question last year and I think mentioned earlier today, and that's operational resilience by design. So really embedding that into new initiatives and products. So even with the full support of your board and management, a strong risk culture and prioritization, financial resources are never unlimited for op resilience. So organizations always have this long list of activities that they need to prioritize. And so given the inherent challenge of that, it's important for organizations to consider adopting that approach. So having operational resilience embedded in your design all the time. That default model where all aspects of resiliency are considered and embedded in anything new, whether you're talking about products or services, technology, processes, practices, if you establish a culture and a methodology to incorporate resilience into anything new from the start, this can really help to minimize the extent of future investments, including major rework on technology platforms and systems. So it's back to the balance between being proactive and being reactive, and which one do you prefer? So your organizations will always have ongoing investment in operational resilience, but if you start something new with that being considered, it becomes more about maintenance and continuous improvement than a major overhaul sometime down the road. And that hopefully means fewer major op resilience projects in the future that are needed to close those major gaps.
Absolutely. It's much easier to build it by design than to have to rework it after the fact. And Sonia, the last word is over to you.
Thanks. So I'm going to steal from one of my board colleagues, and he uses this in a different kind of context, but I think it applies really well to operational resilience. And so I have a board colleague that is always saying to management in our board meetings, measure twice, cut once. And I love that phrase. I love that term. And I think it's really fitting for the environment that we're working in. And the way that I interpret that is really do your homework, do your analysis, do all the quantitative and qualitative work, have your systems and your frameworks in place, do the kinds of things that Pete and Mario have just been describing. And once you've done that, you can move forward with confidence. And so, to me, it sums it up really nicely. So that would be my final advice. Measure twice, cut once.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your insights today. I know there's a couple key takeaways that I would have from this session. Certainly balancing collaboration with challenge and making sure that you have that respectful culture around how you challenge, but enabling that collaboration to happen is just so important. Mario, I think you said it a good few times around resilience by design, so important and so helpful. And then last but not least, certainly just the importance of building operational resilience in as part of your culture from the ground up. So important and so vital to enable operational resilience to be a strength for an organization. So thank you so much to our wonderful panelists today. It's been really amazing to lead this conversation, and I hope we can come back next year as well. So thank you so much to everyone who has listened in today, and we hope you enjoy the summit this year, and we may see you next year. Thank you.